and tuning into this talk. If you're not sure which rabbit hole you happen to be in right now, you're here to listen to Harith Kamarul, who's going to be talking about crypto and blockchain and NFTs. We at the Center for Artistic Research invited Harith because we've heard him before. I've had a chance to speak with him. He's very brilliant and has a quite wonderful way of very accessible way of describing complex technologies. So we're really happy to have him here. Harith handles the product and community. Some of you have maybe read the poster, so this is a bit redundant, but he handles the product and community at Etherscan, which is a leading block explorer of Ethereum. Now, Ethereum is an open source, permissionless blockchain powering thousands of decentralized applications. Harith will explain a bit more about that. Harith has been organizing also Ethereum Malaysia, which is a community meetup that I joined and strongly suggested for those who want to keep expanding in this area. The meetup explores every week or a few weeks. They have a speaker who explores technology and related case uses of the technology. And they've been doing that since 2018. So before this, he worked at HelloGold, Great Eastern Life, and BFM 89.9, my favorite radio station. Okay. So the talk is being hosted by CFAR, which is the Center for Artistic Research, and we are in the Faculty of Creative Industries. We are a group of 11 or 12 artists and designers who are researching a wide variety of topics, which are close to our hearts, which includes storytelling, creative writing, digital animation, painting, sculpture, documentary filmmaking, video art, performance art, the ethnography of indigenous cultures, the history of the urban landscape, particularly in Kajang, and reef conservation, and its interface with art, art history, mysticism and art, and much more if there's anything else in the world to study. The people who are working on this particular event and behind the scenes, some of whom you can see on screen, are Eugene Fu, Joanne Lai, Claire Tan, CK Wang, and Carmen Ng. So now to start with, and you should have by now received the poll, and the poll is 5 questions that Harith requested. Okay, now you're getting it. So have you ever heard of Bitcoin? Do you know the difference between Bitcoin and blockchain? Do you have a crypto portfolio? Do you have a blockchain or Web3 wallet? And have you ever used a smart contract? So I'm going to pause now, and so you can take a couple minutes to fill out the poll, and this will help Harith to know his audience and to figure out how to gear his talk. Okay, thanks. Fill it out.
I think I'll go ahead and share my screen.
After the poll, I'll do a little bit of housekeeping and then we'll start.
At the moment, it's still 65% participation. So let's just see.
Okay, so those of you who haven't done it yet, please tune into the poll, which is on your screen. Please fill it out so that Harith has a sense of who you are and how to gear his talk. Thanks. How are we doing?
Come on, 20 more people haven't filled up the poll.
Yeah, about 20, 21 more. Come on, it's just 5 questions. Just
5
yes, no,
questions,
yes, no,
everyone.
and
Just
that's
do
it.
the poll.
Go
Yep.
for it. Go for it. Click
Yeah.
that mouse.
You know, I think the students are scared to do polls because it reminds them of exam.
It's anonymous. Nobody knows who answered what.
Now, 2
Okay.
more answered. Still 20, about 19 haven't done it.
Okay, we'll give 30 more seconds, then we'll.
All right.
Oh, do you know the difference?
Last chance to fill out the poll.
Oh, cool.
Seem to have stopped at
Okay. 80%. Shall we? 69 respondents. All right. Do you want to
All right.
announce the results?
Okay, so on the housekeeping, we'll have Harith will do an approximately 60-minute. It may be a bit more because he really likes to talk generally for 2 hours on the topic, but we've been like holding him back a bit, and but so we're aiming for 60 minutes plus, and because this is a rabbit hole. I mean, this is not a rabbit mound. This is not a small topic. This is a quite complex topic. It's a new technology in the existence of humanity, and it requires some in-depth conversation, even at an introductory level. So Harith likes to do the job well, and we don't want to, hold him back too much. So I'll be giving him time cues periodically, and he will keep talking until he feels that he's done enough for this particular presentation. There will be a question and answer period of 30 minutes after he stops, and after he's finished. And so during the talk, you can ask questions in the chat box, and after, and we'll take a pause every now and then and maybe throw a few questions at him if they're urgent and they seem to be right on topic. And then after that, if you want to, those who want to talk directly to him and ask a question by voice, please raise your hand in the Zoom during the question and answer period only, not before that. So because we don't have much time, please keep your questions succinct and to the point, okay? And then we'll have another poll after the talk, so you can let us know if you enjoyed the talk and if you want more information. We're planning 2 other talks on Ethereum, on blockchain and NFTs. After this, one will be a how-to-do, very pragmatic talk, and the other will be a critical discussion of the impact of blockchain and these new technologies on the environment, on gender, on class and accessibility, etc. So it'll be kind of an academic analysis that we'll try to do in that talk. Okay, so without further ado, Harith, the screen is yours. Thank you.
All right, thanks. Thanks a lot, Ray and the organizing team. As Ray mentioned, I usually do this in 2 hours. So I'm going to try and kind of squeeze them into 1 hour. I probably will go over a little bit, but I'll try and keep it as short as possible. So I might be speaking a little bit quickly. So if I am doing that, just feel free to let me know in the chat if I should slow down a little bit. I do want to cover a lot of these things. And as Ray said, I want to give enough basic understanding so you have a strong foundation. And from there, you can read up a lot more on your own. All right, so today's topic is Blockchain 101 into a rabbit hole of money, decentralization, and smart contracts. We'll give a little bit of flavor of NFTs as well, because I hear that's what people are interested in these days. But it's mostly the same topic. All right. Yeah, so these are the same questions that you answered in a poll. And before I start, I'll just share this quick video of Tom Cruise.
I'm going to show you some magic. It's the real thing. I mean, it's all the real thing.
All right, so if anyone knows why I'm showing this video, feel free to put it in the chat. Otherwise, I'll give you the spoilers in like, say, 5 seconds. All right, so why I'm showing you this video is that of Tom Cruise is that it's not actually Tom Cruise. This is an entirely made up video by, it's called a deep fake. It's a video created by AI, and it's just using the stuff that internet has of Tom Cruise to create a fake scene where he is acting and saying these things. So if you go to TikTok and you search for @DeepTomCruise, you'll find a lot of other videos of Tom Cruise doing random stuff, and none of them are actually really him. And why do I mention this thing? You can imagine if you saw a video of, say, people like, say, Anwar Ibrahim or Azmin Ali doing certain activities that may not be welcome in our society. And that video could be completely made up, a fake one created by AI. And if you can imagine your typical auntie on a WhatsApp sharing the chain messages, how those kinds of stories can just go viral very quickly. And these kind of fake stories can go out and cause damage all across society. And that's actually one of the things that an NFT can be useful for, because you can stamp authenticity on a video. So Tom Cruise can say that this is really him or not, or a media agency that is reputable can put a stamp that they were the ones that that shot this video and so on. So then you can fight against this oncoming future where AI will be dominating things across our lives. But yeah, so this is just a little flavor of NFTs, or we'll get a bit more into that later. We have some basic stuff that we need to cover before that. Oops. Yeah. So why the title is called Rabbit Hole? If you've ever watched or read this Alice in Wonderland, you know this story that she falls down this rabbit hole into this crazy magical world of magic and talking rabbits and so on. And that's the experience that is very common for a lot of people when they enter the cryptocurrency or blockchain space. You'll find it very familiar, this feeling of staying up late until night, watching some video or reading some article, trying to understand this new mind-bending concept that you haven't been familiar with. And it's quite common to see people in the space with heavy eye bags, just because you've been trying to keep up with the whole space the whole time. And a little bit of intro to myself. I think Ray mentioned it earlier. So I work at Etherscan, which is the leading block explorer for Ethereum, and also for other smart contract powered blockchains. None of that make sense right now, but I'll explain a little bit more later. One thing to note is that it's a Malaysian company. Like, we're all Malaysian. Our founders Malaysian. The team is in Malaysia, in Shah Alam, and we're actually one of the top 500 websites in the whole world. So it's kind of a cool thing, just to know that Malaysians can do stuff like this as well. And I also run Ethereum Malaysia, which is a meetup group. It's an independent group, not owned by any company or anyone. And we don't focus on the price of cryptocurrency, on pumping and dumping whatever coins, but on the use cases, on understanding the technology and what you can use the technology for. So if you guys are interested, even if you're not from a computer science background, we welcome everyone. And we do talks like this and even more advanced talks. So we invite guests from around the world who are from various projects in the space to talk about some new concept or what their project is doing. A basic overview of what we'll be covering. Before you can talk about blockchains, we'll clarify some common terms or some common misconceptions that people might have, some basic idea of what money is and what decentralization means. And then we'll go into blockchain with some kind of basic features that is common across Bitcoin, which is the oldest one, and almost all blockchains. And then we'll go into this blockchain 2.0, what that means. And we'll go over some local companies and communities and some cultural thing about crypto. And then finally, the so what, like why should all of this matter to you listening? So some preamble. One common misconception, and I think even in the poll, most people answered that they don't know the difference between Bitcoin and blockchain. So one easy way to figure this out is if you can imagine a Venn diagram, and the biggest set is distributed ledger technology, and a subset inside that is blockchain, and Bitcoin is one subset inside blockchain. So to use an analogy, if you think about transportation as a technology, then within transportation, you have cars, instead of aeroplanes or ships or trains. And then within cars, you have one brand of a car, which is Toyota. So you can think of Bitcoin as one brand or one type of car, even though it's the oldest or the father of all other blockchains, but it is one kind of blockchain. And there are many, many other kinds as well. And they can be very different from Bitcoin. So don't confuse between Bitcoin and other blockchains out there. Another common kind of term that people misunderstand is cryptocurrency and what that means compared to the others. The better term to think of is crypto asset, because cryptocurrency is one type of asset. Like in the real world, you have different kinds of assets. So in the crypto space, you have a crypto token, which if you can imagine going to a casino, you have those chips that you can spend, or if you can think of a school sports day and you go to this stall and you exchange your money for these coupons, which you can use to buy some food or play some games. A crypto security is just a representation of real world security, such as stocks or bonds. It's just put on the blockchain. And finally, we have the cryptocurrency, which is an asset that is used as currency, and Bitcoin is one such example. But there are many other kinds of assets, not just currencies. And if you think of crypto as only currency, then you are missing sort of the forest for the trees. And another thing that is a bit confusing when people first enter this space is that the word Bitcoin can mean two different things. Generally, capital B Bitcoin refers to the technology. So if you think of the example I shared earlier about a car, and Bitcoin with a small b refers to the unit of the currency. So you have one Bitcoin out of 21 million out there. So that's one unit. And if you think about a car, for you to be able to use the car, you need to be able to fuel it or put some fuel into the car before you can drive it to any distance. So one unit of Bitcoin with a small b is what you need to be able to use Bitcoin, the technology or the platform. And it doesn't help because some people would tend to sometimes misuse the term. So sometimes they mean small b Bitcoin when they refer to the technology and big B Bitcoin when they refer to the currency. But if you understand that there are these two different definitions, different terms, then from the context of a sentence, you can figure out what the person is trying to say. Okay, then next is what money is. And if anyone here has taken some basic economics course, you know that the typical example or typical definitions of money is that it is a store of value, it's a unit of account, or medium of exchange. I'm not going to delve into this because you can just go on Wikipedia, even if you don't remember what this is. What I will talk about a bit more is that money, that people tend to kind of forget about this thing, is that money needs to have a limited supply. It needs to have some sort of scarcity to it, because you can imagine if I can create my own money and I just print it out of thin air into like an unlimited supply or up to myself, then very easily the basic laws of supply and demand means that when there's so many supply, the value of a single unit of this currency will be a lot less worthy. Another thing, and very important thing to highlight, is that money isn't a real physical thing. Money is an abstract idea. It's a representation of value. It is not the physical item that we commonly kind of transact with. Those things are money, but it's not a real physical thing. And what I mean by that, if I can misquote Lord Varys from the Game of Thrones, value resides where men believe it resides. As with many things in life, whether many of the most important things in life, whether it's love or religion or politics, these things don't exist in the real world. There's no physical item that is love. You have physical items that represent love, but they are not by themselves love. So money is similar. It's this shared belief that we have as a society, as groups of people. We have a same belief in one thing, that it has value, therefore it is money. But the thing itself is not money. And to give an example, if you think about the pieces of paper that you see here, the US dollar, the ringgit, gold bars, these are what people would typically think of when we say money, but they are not by themselves money, because it's just a piece of paper, right? The US dollar, and even gold is just a piece of rock. It doesn't have any value in itself until we as human beings give value to it. And if you think about it, even nowadays, we're so familiar with using e-wallets like GrabPay or Boost Wallet, and there is no physical item that represents the money that we're spending for our delivery of food, right? Like it's just pixels on a screen. There's no physical item that represents that money. And if you think that central banks own some gold that's backing that money, then you are wrong or have been lied to, because the world as a whole has moved on from the gold standard since 1971, and that hasn't been the case for as long as most of us here have existed. And if you think about some less common examples of money, I hope everyone here has never had or never will have the unfortunate experience of being in prison, but it's commonly known that in prisons, cigarettes are used as money. Like you would use cigarettes to exchange for goods or services within a prison. And for kids, maybe 20 years ago, when they were in playgrounds, they would sometimes use Pokemon playing cards and trade with each other to be able to like buy toys or get something from their friends. And if you look at societies from hundreds or thousands of years ago, some of them are known to have used things like seashells as a form of money. If you ask anyone here, none of us would accept these three things as money, but within those certain contexts or circumstances, they were widely used as money within those groups of people. And to give a more modern example, so this is the currency of Venezuela, the Bolivar. And for those of you who've sort of followed the news, Venezuela has had millions of percentages of inflation over the last decade or more or so, such that people would rather use those pieces of paper that represent the Bolivar as origami handbags or to draw cartoons on. And they actually derive more value from these things because you can actually carry things in a bag, as the paper itself has no value. If you want to buy some TV from someone else, you need like millions of dollars of Bolivar. So again, the piece of paper has lost any kind of shared belief that people have in it as to its value. And so now there's no difference between it and origami stuff. A more closer to home example is, for those of you who know this thing called the duit pisang, and if you don't, you can ask some of your older relatives who may have been around in the sort of World War II era. So the story is that this duit pisang is money that was enforced on Malaya when the Japanese military was occupying us. And the name duit pisang comes from the $10 having pictures of bananas. And imagine if you were a real banana farmer at that time. You've been like selling your bananas on the market, you get paid for your bananas, and you want to save for the future. So maybe you save or you store some of these duit pisang under your bed. And let's say one day you go to sleep and you wake up and you find out that the Japanese military have been defeated. They've lost the World War, they've withdrawn from Malaya to go back home, and now we're independent, or we're free from occupation by the Japanese military again. And it's good news for everyone, but it's a little bit bittersweet for you, because now that $1,000 of duit pisang that you've stored under your bed the whole time, in the blink of an eye or in the space of one night, when you wake up, the whole value of that $1,000 has disappeared, because no one in their right mind would want to accept this money that was forced by the Japanese military. So something that could have afforded you maybe 1,000 or 10,000, like nasi lemak, in just one night, that whole value has disappeared and gone. So these are just examples to show that money isn't a real physical thing. And it's one thing that it's hard to really imagine or understand unless you really, really think deeply about it. We kind of like assume what money is and we just accept it. But in reality, it's a shared belief, and it doesn't have to be the money that you're born with that you use. There are many different kinds of money that can be used across different societies. And yeah, for those of us of my generation, and I'm sure most of the people here, it really hits you straight in the pocket, because on the left side, you can see here, this is a chart of the US dollar and the relative value of $1. You can see that from the sort of early 1900s, $1 now is worth almost 100 of what it was in 1900s. Like, you could have bought a lot more things with $1 back then compared to $1 now. And the same applies for the ringgit. And these are a natural consequence of having what's called fiat money, which is money that is just printed out of thin air by a central bank, and it's not backed by anything. And you can just sort of check for yourself. Like, if I wanted to buy a piece of property today, even if I had the same sort of job experience, the same skill set as my parents back when they bought their house, the same property for me would cost maybe 3 or 4 times more expensive than for them back then. And it's the same house, it's the same skill sets that I have. It's just the reality of what inflation is. And if you look at the chart on the right, this is from a website called WTFhappenedin1971.com. Basically, 1971, as I mentioned earlier, is when the US government, and then followed by basically every other government, left the gold standard, so that every national currency was simply backed by belief in the central bank and not any physical assets such as gold. You can see that since 1971, in this case, it's a consumer price index, which tracks inflation. The metric has gone completely crazy compared to what it was before, like multiple times higher than it was. And the same goes for things like median salary, for many different kinds of economic metrics. And these are official numbers from the US government. It's not some conspiracy theory made up by these crazy crypto people. So just think about how money isn't a real thing, and what we use as money right now is going through a lot of devaluation that causes inflation in prices. And inflation is only because we measure these things with our national currencies. But if you think about the real value of those things compared to the amount of like work you need to put in to be able to afford them, they're actually the same. It's just that the money that we have has been printed out of thin air. The supply has gone up by more and more, such that 1 unit of it is worth a lot less than what it was a few decades ago.
All right, that's 15 minutes now.
All right, so I need to go a lot faster than that. Thank you, Ray. So why it's also important is because Bitcoin is widely believed to be created as a countermeasure towards this irresponsible inflation of national currencies by central banks. So the first ever block in the Bitcoin blockchain has a headline that says, "The Times, 3rd January 2009, Chancellor on brink of second bailout for banks," which is actually taken directly from a headline in a newspaper, in a UK newspaper called The Times. And it's widely kind of understood as a message that Bitcoin is a way to exit the financial system that isn't fair for the average person, and it enriches only those who are connected or who are in the financial system. So that's what money is. I'll try to go a little bit faster. So decentralization, for those of you who are Muslim or you have friends who are Muslim, you might know that this thing called the Quran isn't a book that fell from the sky. It's a series of verses that are memorized in exact content and exact order, such that there are thousands of people who memorize it. And so if Harith decides to come along and kind of tries to add one line that just says maybe Harith is handsome, and if there were only 2 people that memorize the Quran, I can find them and I can bribe them with lots of money, and I can coordinate kind of lying to everyone about adding this one small line in the middle. But if there are thousands or millions of people who memorize the Quran in exact order and content, it's extremely difficult, nigh on impossible for me to be able to afford that bribe and also do it in a coordinated way to convince everybody else. And that's decentralization, because you, instead of trusting one source or one book, even, you're not trusting the physical book, you're trusting the thousands or millions of people that memorize the exact same version of the Quran all over the world. And another example is that for wedding. So maybe some here still have this Disney happy ever after idea for wedding, where it's celebrating the joining of 2 people. But there is a much more practical use for weddings for society since eons ago. And that is, if, let's say, I'm married to a lovely lady, and there are 200 people in attendance. If the next month, let's say, any one of you who attended my wedding, and you're in a neighboring village, and you notice me walking around being all romantic with another lady that wasn't the lady I married, then you can report me to the rest of society. And it's a mechanism for society to sort of make sure that everyone doesn't misbehave and everyone is doing what they're supposed to do. So if there was only one priest or imam or rabbi that were present at my wedding, then it's much easier for me to get away with my infidelity. But if there are hundreds of people, then the chances of me getting away gets much lower. And a modern example of this is comparing Google Docs versus Microsoft Word. So for those of you who've done any like group work, you are very familiar with this, especially if you use Microsoft Word before. Like if you use Word, you have to sync the same file, you have to save it, close it, send it to a friend, and they will edit it on their own. And that's a world of difference between with using Google Docs, where you can edit everything at the same time. And if one of my group members are trying to be naughty and deleting my work, I can literally just go on view edit history, and I can see who did it and when. And we can do things at the same time, even if we are in opposite corners of the world. And how this works is that Google has thousands of servers, such that even if hundreds of them go down, there are still hundreds left that are all connecting to the same file, online, and all updating in sync at the same time. Okay, so that's decentralization. So basically, you don't trust in one source of information or source of truth. You have many different sources, or what's called nodes, that provide you with the same version of truth. And if you understand these things, you actually already understand what Bitcoin is, because in short, Bitcoin is just decentralized money. And it may not be as powerful if you just simply hear this example, but imagine if you were a doctor in Syria before the bombs started dropping. You know, you lived a relatively comfortable life. You had a nice house, nice car, nice family. But then let's say the tension started increasing, you know, bombs started dropping, and you wanted to migrate away to rescue yourself from the kind of terrible situation that you're in. At that point, if you wanted to move all your wealth, it's extremely difficult to move it to another country. You can't move your car, you can't move your house, even your banking system is at that point collapsed, and you can't transfer to another country, and no one would want to accept your Syrian currency because they know that the economy is screwed. So what option do you have to carry your wealth over? Maybe you can bring some gold bars, but even then, you know, that's not safe. You can get robbed halfway through. But if you had a Bitcoin wallet, which is literally just on the internet, no one holds any physical things. You can back it up with just 12 words that you can memorize or you can write down. And if you carry yourself over to the other side of the world, all you have to do is get back online, re-enter that same 12-word passphrase, and now you have the same access to, let's say, $1 million worth of wealth that you had before. And that has never existed in the entire history of mankind. You can start over fresh, even if you had to leave a life that you had before. And you don't have to start over as this sort of refugee immigrant trying to like do basic work to survive. And yeah, for Malaysians, especially of this day, we may not fully appreciate it, but you just need to talk to people in Argentina, in Venezuela, Zimbabwe, or Palestine, and they would really appreciate the impact or the powerful quality that Bitcoin brings to people's lives. Okay, so, but that doesn't really tell you much if I say decentralized money. So what does that mean? So you think about financial system that we have today, we generally have a central third party, a bank or money changer or some other agent in between. That's because if I wanted to give money to Ray and he's not in front of me in person, there is no way for me to do it without a third party, because I could like literally mail him my cash, and he might say that, hey, that mail never reached my house. Maybe it got lost or someone stole it, and there's no way for me to prove that that mail got sent to him. And vice versa, there's no way for Ray to prove if I told him I'd sent, but I never actually did. So very quickly, we can break down in these kinds of like transactions that are done. So a bank, a money changer is very useful because I don't have to trust Ray when I don't know him. I just trust this centralized third party. But as you can see with examples like Venezuela, or even if you've ever done any work for an international client and they pay you via PayPal, like these scenarios may not necessarily all work out. Sometimes the economy collapses. Sometimes with PayPal, they charge a huge, like 3 or 5% of the pay, and none of that benefits you or the buyer. It goes to them just because they're the trusted third party that you have to use. Now imagine the 100 of us here. We can create our own form of money, and we don't even need any fancy technology for that. We just need to have like a WhatsApp group with all of us inside, and a buku 555, you know, like those notebooks you can write things down, and we could just have like a ledger or like a column for every person and their balance. So if I say send money to Eugene, I say I send $10, then everyone will check. Okay, if Harith's balance has at least $10, then the transaction is approved, and we will deduct 10 from Harith and add 10 to Eugene. And everyone just goes and checks in their books and updates it. And only when everyone has checked and kind of replied in the WhatsApp group that, okay, this transaction is accepted, then the transaction goes through. And you don't need any paper or rock for that to happen, as long as everyone has agreed. But for people who are like thinking about it a bit more deeply, you realize that that's not practical. It'll be impossible for us to verify every transaction that has happened. Even with like 5 people, it'll be very difficult. With 100 people, it's basically impossible. And even 1,000 or 1,000,000, practically you can't do anything anymore. But imagine instead of human beings, you have computers. And instead of humans checking these transactions, the computers are the ones that are checking whether there is enough, $10 in Harith's account, and therefore only we approve. And it sounds a little bit crazy, but if you think about how our computers nowadays, even our mobile phones can stream movies on Netflix or play massively multiplayer online games, then updating one entry in a ledger is extremely simple for them to do. And it doesn't take that much computing power at all. So you can have 1,000, you can have 10,000 computers all updating the same entry, kind of like in the Google Doc example, all updating one sentence together. So every computer has the same version of things that have happened. Then you can create a form of money between, let's say, the 100 of us here today. And when you think about how the programming code that's used to power the software of these computers is open source. That means it's transparent, it's public, it's not hidden, behind closed walls. Like anyone who understands the programming language can read every single line of the code, so they know exactly what's happening. So anyone in the world can verify that the code does what it's meant to do. Then you have this system where trust is minimized because maybe you can't understand the code, but if there are hundreds or thousands of people out there who have verified it independently, then you can be much more certain in that this code is working the way it should. As with scientific discoveries, like we don't necessarily know that the brain is inside someone's head, because I've never opened up someone's head to find out, but there have been scientists who've done that work and who have tested and experimented and documented their work. So that a lot of people have done this, or a lot of people have shown that humans have gone to the moon. If you're a conspiracy theorist, you might disagree, but generally, then you can have a minimized trust in that what is said to have been done has been done. Okay, so that's sort of the basic idea of Bitcoin or decentralized money. And we always have to start with Bitcoin because that's the most basic thing out there, and it started the whole thing. So if you're not clear, make sure to ask your questions and I'll answer them later. Next, we'll go into sort of some common features of blockchain, and this applies for Bitcoin and other blockchains as well. So the first thing I want to talk about is a block explorer. So the computers I mentioned, they track every transaction that's happened, but most people wouldn't bother to run these computers. And also it will be shown in this command line interface, like very kind of programmer kind of interface. So a block explorer, what it does, it allows you to see these contents in an accessible way. And before I go more into this, the first thing I want to mention is that blockchains are not anonymous. So if you've ever heard in the news or people that talk about how criminals are using Bitcoin and things like that, that's actually not true. And if you were a criminal, I would suggest don't use most blockchains like Bitcoin, because everything is transparent, everything is on chain, and you cannot hide what you've done. Even if you've done something today, that transaction exists on the blockchain, and someone can track it down even 20 years later, and they can kind of go through the jigsaw puzzle and find out the source transaction and tie it back to you. So yeah, don't use Bitcoin if you want to launder any money. If you want to transfer 2.6 billion, Bitcoin is probably the worst thing that you can use to do that. And just to show, so this is Etherscan, what I mentioned earlier. This is a block explorer that I work for. It's based out of Malaysia. It's the main explorer used for the Ethereum blockchain. And if you can see on the top left, so that's an address that represents the wallet. So one saving grace that you have with using blockchains is that there is no IC that's tied to your address or your wallet. Like you don't have to do any KYC, like registering your details to get a wallet. You can simply create it and you get this random string of characters that no one decides. I think in this case, there's like 16 to the power of 64 options. And the number is such a huge gazillions of numbers. It's like atoms in the universe or grains of sand in the Sahara, where the number is so vast that our human brain cannot imagine the vastness of that number. So the likelihood of you guessing one address that somehow has value inside that is owned by anyone out there is extremely unlikely. So that's the address.
All right, that's 30 minutes now.
All right, thank you. So you can see here, you can see a balance of this address, and you can see the transaction history. So it's as if anyone in the world can see your online bank account. And that's what we like to describe an Explorer. It's like a search engine and also a read-only bank account, because you can see all the details of anyone out there. And no one can stop you. There's no like exclusive address that is blocked or censored. It's shown to anyone in the whole world. And that's very different than our current financial system. So you can think of a block explorer like if you go to a library and you walk up to the librarian and you tell him, I want to see the contents of this book on shelf 17B. And the librarian will never stop you from accessing that book. They will like take that book, bring it and show it to you. And there is no hidden or reserved or special section of the library. Any book inside the library you can access. No one can stop you. One key thing to note is that each blockchain is its own library. So Bitcoin is its own library and Ethereum is its own library. You cannot go to the Ethereum library and look up a Bitcoin book or vice versa, because it doesn't exist inside those libraries. So closely similar to Block Explorer, the idea of Block Explorer is what's called a wallet. And a wallet is kind of a misleading term, and it's unfortunate that the industry came up with it, because it's closer to a safety deposit box. If you can imagine a bank vault where you can put in your necklaces and your money and lock the box and take the key away. So that's what a blockchain wallet is, except it's in the cloud. It's in the internet. There's no physical vault that stores your stuff. It exists entirely on the internet. And you don't have a wallet that you carry around with you. Some people might say you're carrying this device that's called a wallet, but it's actually better to think of these as the keys to open your wallet. So you're carrying your keys around with you, but all your wealth is inside this safety deposit box that's on the internet. Okay, so if you look back at the library example earlier, so in this case, what you are trying to tell the librarian is, instead of seeing the contents of a book, you want to tell him to move the book from, let's say, 17B to shelf 13C. And this time the librarian will stop you and say, okay, can you prove that you are the owner of 17B? If you can, then he will move it. If you cannot, he will not do. And there's nothing that you can do. Even if you're the Prime Minister of Malaysia, he won't listen to you at all, because he's just a piece of code. And if you've transferred your book from 17B to 13C, even if after 1 second that you've done that is been moved, you figure out that actually it was a mistake. You meant to send it somewhere else. So you go to the librarian and say, hey, can you reverse this transaction? There is nothing that the librarian can do unless you can also prove that you own 13C. So it's immutable. It cannot be changed. There's no person that you can negotiate with to change things for you, because everything is done automatically by computer code. Okay, and one way to think of wallets is also if you can imagine a mailbox. So wallets are using this technology called public-private key cryptography, and it's a very technical thing. But just to keep it simple, you can imagine a public key as the mailbox to your house. So if you bought anything on Lazada or Shopee and you want to have it delivered to your house, you have to input your house address so that they know where to send it. So public key is an address that you share with the whole world, because or well, not the whole world, but people who you want to be able to send things to you. And a private key is both the mail and the key to open your mailbox. And it's very important to understand it's not just the key, it's also the house address as well. So if you ever lose your private key, or if you ever like accidentally show it to someone, then it's as if you literally are giving a map with an X marks the spot and the key to open your house door. And if this random person goes to your house, walks up to it and grabs everything that's inside, like your sofa, your TV, and they take it and they move it to your house, there's absolutely nothing that you can do because you've given them your house address and key. It's very important to understand that the private key has to be kept secure. Even if there's someone that you completely trust, your brother or sister or your spouse, 5 years later you might get divorced and you're not living as happily ever after as before. Then if they have the same access to your private key, then they could take away all the wealth that was inside that blockchain wallet. So in the crypto space, one important thing to understand is that you are your own security. You cannot trust anyone else out there. You can only trust yourself. There is no PIDM, like an insurance deposit kind of system, like just imagine a central bank. There's no Google forget password. If you screw up, there's no one out there that can save you. So in some ways, the decentralized sort of system is scarier than our current system. And actually, it's quite common that people become a lot more paranoid in this space, because you can have $5 million worth of Bitcoin in this private key, and if you lose it, then all your wealth is gone. And you actually hear stories about people who mined Bitcoin when it was a few cents, and then 10 years later they know that it's worth a lot more, but they've thrown away their computer, so they can't find that hard drive with all the Bitcoin anymore. So just remember, you are your own security. It's a different world than we have in our normal financial system. So there are different kinds of wallets. I think I'll just briefly run through them. So paper wallet, where you literally get given your private key. You can see down here. And if you enter that private key anywhere, any website on the internet that has supports blockchain wallets, then you can unlock the wallet that's behind it, and anything that's inside you can take out if you want. It's called paper wallet because you never want to save it in a digital copy, because if you ever know a celebrity kind of like adult videos that get leaked out, a lot of times it's not because the celebrity intentionally leaks it out, but because they sent, let's say, their computer for repairs and they did some video for private sort of consumption, and they thought they deleted it, but nothing ever gets deleted from a computer, and the repair shop could like unearth that video and then just sell it for money on the dark web. So that can also happen for your blockchain private keys. So never save it in a digital copy. You save it in a piece of paper. You can laminate it, store it in the safest place that you know. So that's what's called a paper wallet. But that one's not very practical to carry around, because you never want to carry just your paper wallet, and then if it gets stolen from you, then all your wealth is gone. So there's this thing that's called a hardware wallet. So if you talk to people in the crypto space and they mention a wallet, usually what they mean is a hardware wallet. So these are devices commonly shaped like a USB, and you can plug it into your computer, and if you enter the PIN, then you have access to your blockchain wallet. But otherwise, even if you get stolen, someone needs to guess your PIN, and it's not very user-friendly to do that very quickly. And if you lose your wallet, you can just go back home where you have a backup 12-word phrase, and you can restore access to your wallet and move your wealth somewhere else before that thief can steal all your money. And then what's called a Web3 or smart wallet, and this doesn't exist for Bitcoin, but for more modern blockchains like Ethereum, you can have a mobile app or have a Chrome extension, a browser extension that enables you to access websites using your blockchain wallet. So there are actually things that are being worked on, such as by Twitter and by Discord, where you can sign up and sign in using just your MetaMask in this case, or your blockchain wallet, instead of having to create a username and password. And there are a lot of things out there that comes as a consequence of doing this, but I'll get to that later. Okay, so next one is mining. Again, I'll just very briefly go through it. I mentioned cryptography. So mining uses this thing called cryptography. You can think of it as like a Da Vinci Code, where there's a lot of sort of secret encoding things that you need to decipher to be able to access. And if you can imagine, I don't have a good picture of this, but any random like bank heist movie where, you know, the robber will kind of like plug in this device and it will just like guess a lot of different numbers. That's what mining is. You're just guessing a lot of different numbers until you find the right one that allows you to mine a block. And I'll get to what mining is, but so that's what cryptography is. And it uses this thing called hash functions, which are, so catch256 is one example of a hash. And you can see here, if I input the word cat, I get this very random string of numbers. If I put a different word with just one letter difference, then I get a completely different set of numbers. So there is no way for you to guess from reading this 527 whatever that the input was actually cat. And similarly, you cannot guess from 5AD that the input was car. And even though one letter is the only difference between the two, the output is completely different. There's no resemblance between the two at all. There's no relationship between the two outputs. And one more thing is that the length of these hashes are all consistent, always the same. And you can also think of it as like a snowflake. You know, it's supposed to be, every snowflake is unique. If you can imagine melting a snowflake, so trying to like guess the input of a hash is as if you are trying to reconstruct the snowflake from the melted puddle of water that it has become. So it's like very difficult to do one way compared to another. Very quickly, another example is, if you can think of your high school maths, like your exponentials versus your roots. So like 7 to the power of 3 is much easier to calculate than the cube root of 7. So yeah, it's a mathematical function where one way is a lot easier versus another. And why do I mention this is because hashes can be put together such that you have hashes of hashes. And this is what blockchains do. So imagine you only change one box in this tree diagram. And the one box that you change, instead of green, it becomes pink. And because the colors are all like based from the earlier layer, then if you look at the second layer, the what was like this aqua color becomes purple. And the bottom layer also gets affected, and instead of gray, it becomes brown. And it's a way to very quickly and easily check whether something has been done correctly or not. So if there was some hanky-panky done, some corruption in the data, you can very quickly see, instead of going through 4 items, you can just go through one item to see very quickly whether this is the correct color or not. Yeah, so mining, if you go back to the example that I shared earlier of the computer nodes, so imagine we have 100 people here and we run this shared money that we have in our WhatsApp group. So even if you use computers, it's faster, but if you can imagine, the only people that are transacting are me and say Joanne. And we're the only 2 people that are transferring money to each other. The 98 other people are not doing anything. They're just like running their computers. And then they will very quickly ask, like, they're not using the system, right? So even though it's a computer, they're not doing any work themselves, but they still have to pay electricity bills to power the computer. But they're not using the system, right? They're not sending anyone any money or receiving money from anyone. So then they might decide, hey, what's the incentive for me to keep running, right? I have to pay my bills. So I'm just going to shut down my computer until I need to use it later. And if all 98 people like shut down their computers, then this is very bad for the system, because now it's just me and Joanne. And if we wanted to, we could cheat everyone else. Like we could do lots of transactions. Like even if I have $0, I can still send $10 to Joanne. And because everyone else is offline, they can't verify that I'm doing this wrong transactions. So that defeats the purpose of a decentralized sort of system of money. So one of the most beautiful things that this Satoshi Nakamoto, this creator of Bitcoin, did was that he or she or they created this incentive thing. So it's using this concept from game theory where if you can see on the right side there, every computer is connected to the system. And even if you're not transacting, every time there is a new block that gets created. So a block, just imagine it as a box with many different transactions, like many different receipts that's put inside. And a miner is a computer that just sort of suggests a block of new transactions to be accepted. And every computer that's connected is doing the same thing. And the puzzle that I was mentioning earlier, they're all racing to solve a puzzle. And if they solve the puzzle, they earn the right to suggest a new box of transactions. And everyone that suggests a new box, not only do they do that, but they get rewarded with new Bitcoin that gets created out of thin air by them suggesting a box. So you can imagine, like, let's say there's 100 transactions, and I get 1 Bitcoin for mining or like verifying these 100 transactions. So now, even if I'm not making any transactions, I have an incentive to run my computer, because there is a chance, and this is pure chance, that I will be the lucky one to be able to mine a block and therefore receive 1 new Bitcoin that gets created out of thin air. And the word mining comes from the idea of, if you go gold mining, you know, like you're all like trying to dig the earth, and then some lucky people might find gold that's hidden underground. And yeah, so it's all luck of who gets to get that gold piece and put it into sort of use in the economy.
Hi, Harith. We're at 45 minutes now. What we're thinking, tell me if this makes sense to you, that when we hit 1 hour, we'll take 15 minutes of questions, and
Okay.
then we'll return to the talk. Okay.
Okay.
Does that make sense to you? Because you're just getting up ahead of steam. I don't think you're quite ready to cash in your chips yet, right? So
we can actually do questions right after this in like 5 minutes, because I have like a nice checkpoint.
okay.
We can stop at. Yeah, so we can do questions then.
So we'll do that, and then we'll return to the talk, and then we'll do a repeat of that. Maybe in another half hour. Okay.
Yeah, I'll try and do it as quick as I can. Thanks, Ray. So I was saying, you get a new block reward, a new Bitcoin that gets mined out of thin air. There's also one thing important to note, is that you also get paid transaction fees, which means that if I'm paying Joanne, I have to pay a transaction fee, which is not typically what you imagine in the normal financial system. Because, you know, if I send someone using Maybank, I don't have to pay any fees. But I would kind of caution on this, where in actual fact, we do pay a lot of fees when we do transactions in the real world, because if you use Visa or MasterCard, like typically there is a merchant fee that gets charged to the seller, not to you. And the seller generally will just mark up their price to cover that cost. So you're actually being charged fees, you just don't see it in front of your eyes. But transaction fees are important, because then you get to kind of decide whose transactions go through first, whether yours goes through or someone else's, and that's decided by who is offering up a higher transaction fee. You can think of it as like in a highway with a toll, but instead of like a fixed toll of like 2 ringgit 50 cents, it's a bidding system where the highest gets to go first. And one of the really beautiful things as well with this is that there is an adjusted difficulty. You can imagine if there were 1,000 computers, then you can solve this puzzle in the space of, let's say, a minute. But if there were 1,000,000 computers, then all else remaining equal, you'd expect the average time to be much lower, because the chances are now higher that 1 out of 1,000,000 will find the answer before instead of 1 in 1,000. And what Satoshi did was that he made Bitcoin have adjusted difficulty, such that if there are more and more miners, then the difficulty of that puzzle becomes harder and harder. And such that on aggregate, on average, you'll have 1 new Bitcoin block only once every 10 minutes. So if there are more miners, like people get excited, they want to mine more, then the difficulty goes higher, and therefore the time it takes to mine is also longer. And that goes for Bitcoin, and for Ethereum, it's once every 15 seconds. Okay, and this is generally what's called as a proof of work consensus mechanism. I'm not going to go into this, but just as to mention very briefly, you guys can read about it online later afterwards. Yeah, and yeah, actually was want to show this earlier. So a computer in this system of blockchain is referred to as a node. A node you can think of is like the witness at my wedding earlier, where they can verify if transactions are being done correctly or not. And so anyone can be a node, and a node is different from a miner because a miner has an incentive to do it. They get rewarded with new Bitcoin, and they are suggesting that new box of transactions, whereas a node doesn't suggest anything. They just check each transaction that comes in. So in this case, there's no incentive, but there is a community responsibility to run nodes because then you can verify that transactions are being done properly. Okay, and the word sort of blockchain comes from this idea of many different blocks. You can imagine the boxes that I mentioned earlier, and they get added to a chain of other blocks such that if you wanted to hijack the contents of a block that was maybe 100 blocks ago, now you have to be able to do that, you have to affect every other block that came afterwards. So you cannot simply change the 100th block ago. If you do that, you have to change all 100 blocks that came after that because they're all affected in this chain of history that has happened. And yeah, so that's the idea of a blockchain and where the word blockchain comes from. So one final part about this blockchain 1.0 is, at this point, someone might ask, how do I buy these Bitcoins or cryptocurrencies? So as with any market out there, you can buy over the counter. That means you find someone else to buy it from. Or you can go to an exchange, or you can go to a marketplace like your Pasar Malam, where, if you have, let's say, a piece of chicken and you want to sell and you want to get a loaf of bread, the chances of you finding people who want to buy your chicken and sell you a loaf of bread for a price that you want is much more likely if you go to a central place, a marketplace where there are a lot of different buyers and sellers. Whereas if you deal directly with someone else, it's much less likely that you'll find what you want at the price that you want. So similarly with cryptocurrencies, we've created these marketplaces called exchanges, and there are broadly two types of exchanges. One is the fiat to crypto, and in Malaysia, these are licensed. There are only about 4 exchanges today, the most popular one being Luno, and there's some other ones as well, Synergy and Tokenize. And so this is generally where you transfer your ringgit for Bitcoin or Ether. This is limited. I think for Malaysia, the licensed ones only have 5 coins. But if you wanted to trade this Bitcoin or Ethereum for any of the thousands of currencies out there, then you generally have to go to what's called a crypto to crypto exchange. And these are not licensed. So some examples are Binance, Huobi, Kraken, and so on. I don't really want to talk about how to buy and sell, but the key thing that I want to highlight is that exchanges are not wallets. So if you open the Luno account and you hear these stories about all buying and selling crypto on Luno, you're actually not using the blockchain at all. And you are actually trusting Luno instead of storing your Bitcoin in your own wallet. And to give another analogy, if you think about a money changer, and just in this example, you walk up to the money changer and you want to trade your $25 US for 100 ringgit. And the only difference here is that you give the guy $25, but instead of taking 100 ringgit and putting it in your own wallet, you tell this abang that, okay, can you hold on to my 100 ringgit for me? And when I need it, I'll come and take it from you. So you don't take the 100 ringgit, put it in your own wallet, you leave it, you trust it with this guy. And if 1 week afterwards, the money changer gets robbed or it gets burned down, or that abang runs away with your money, there's nothing you can do because you trusted him with your money. So similarly with an exchange, if you use an exchange and you store your wealth in an exchange, then you are trusting that company or that entity to hold your money for you. And if they get robbed or they run away with the money, there's nothing you can do because you went and trusted them. So an exchange is actually very antithetical to the idea of blockchains because now you're trusting someone. And much worse, you're trusting someone in many cases that's not even licensed or regulated. And they will hold your millions of dollars of Bitcoin instead of you putting it in your own wallet. So yeah, so exchanges are like exchanges are not wallets. And it's very important to understand these very different things, because if you hear about these stories about how Bitcoin got hacked, a lot of times Bitcoin, I mean, in reality, Bitcoin has never been hacked. And these stories typically are referring to an exchange that has been hacked. So it's like saying Bitcoin has been hacked. Saying that is like saying the ringgit has been hacked because some money changer got robbed. It doesn't make sense because the underlying network itself has never been harmed. All right, so that's the ending of part 1. I guess I can answer some questions now. I'll just scroll up very quickly. Let's see. So Daniel asks, what if the Syrian doctor has an offshore bank account, Swiss bank account? Yes, so in this case, then that helps him or her. They would have some wealth already out there. But you can imagine, like, if it was you, right? Like, most of your wealth would still be at home. You know, your car, your house, your whatever, that would still be at home. You wouldn't store it in the Swiss account all the time. And when the kind of society is in this collapse, by that time, you can't easily transfer your wealth to your Swiss bank account because your entire banking system is in trouble already. Whereas if you had internet, you can kind of get Bitcoin very easily. Or if you earn money from the internet, then you can immediately earn in Bitcoin instead of even receiving it in your own currency.
Kajun has a interesting question about because it's dependent on computer power or masses of interlinked computers. We're back to the rich get richer because they have the electronic resource. Is that
there is truth in that. Where if you have generally more resources, then you can do more with those resources compared to someone else. Like 10 years ago, any random laptop can be used to mine Bitcoin, but today that's like impossible to be able to do. You'd have to have a whole mining operation. What I would say though is that as with many shifts in wealth historically, like when people move from agricultural society to what you call that? Industrial society. Like previously landowners would basically make money for free because they would charge rent on everyone else. And then new wealth came up because factories started to exist. And if you had a factory, you could create cars and so on. And the landowners would lose in relative wealth. And then the factories lost to like these sort of internet technologies, like your Facebooks and your Googles out there. And now you have crypto that's kind of like creating new forms of wealth, even compared to the what's called Web 2 internet. There are always new classes of wealth that's being created, and it's not the same rich people that are becoming rich in the next wave. And that applies not just for crypto, even for the industrial society sort of economy or the internet economy. Like you can see, like Warren Buffett knows practically nothing about the internet. He's famous for like not investing in internet companies and also for not believing in Bitcoin. So a lot of the wealthiest people would have no reason to support Bitcoin because they're already rich, one, and they have no reason to understand this new thing that comes up and figure out whether it's a scam or it's a real thing or not. So there are many people out there, even some that I personally know, who are just normal people and they bought Bitcoin or Ether or some random meme coin like early this year even, and they might have spent $1,000 or 100 ringgit, and it might give them 1 million ringgit today. So yes, there is an advantage to the wealthy, but in reality, a lot of the wealthy have less incentive to understand the space or invest in it. And anyone who started out, even today, maybe early this year for the current bull run, could make like lots of wealth from almost nothing. So it's not like completely egalitarian. There's no such thing as a utopia, but with these new shifts of wealth, of technology that provide wealth, then not just in crypto's case, right? Like in factories and internet and so on, like people who were not born to wealth can very easily find wealth or create value and therefore get wealth.
So it is a kind of form of laissez-faire capitalism. So it's it's in the hands of individuals, but it is certainly about amassing more capital, whether it's by machines or the value of the Bitcoin, for example. But let me move on to Carmen has a question. What's the difference between licensed and unlicensed exchanges? And who licensed them, and does that mean the licensed ones are more trustworthy? And what's the benefit of choosing a licensed company? And then finally, what can hackers go into the crypto libraries and mess around with the system and change or corrupt the code that identifies the currency, the cryptocurrency?
Yeah, okay. So for the first question, what's the difference? It's just your country's regulations. So in Malaysia, we have the Securities Commission, the SEC, and the Central.
You've gone mute.
Okay, sorry. I was saying for the first question, it's entirely down to the country's regulations. So there's Securities Commission and Bank Negara in Malaysia. When it comes to crypto exchanges, it's under the Securities Commission, so SEC. And with many different financial things, they will provide licenses to the companies that they think are qualified. All that means between license and unlicensed is that one is kind of has a stamp of approval by a regulator and one doesn't. In many cases, such as like the biggest exchange in the world is Binance, and they are not licensed, and this SEC actually advises against using Binance. But in reality, most people are using Binance in the whole world to trade cryptocurrencies on an exchange. So it's kind of like how much you trust your government or how much you trust your regulator. The licensed ones, definitely licensed have some sort of like they've done some basic stuff, you know, they have like a proper bank account, they have some professional standards that they have to meet, but it doesn't necessarily mean that they are necessarily better than the unlicensed ones.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, you want to do the second part?
Yeah. So on the second one, on hackers hacking into crypto libraries. So the thing is, like I mentioned earlier, like imagine you have 1,000 nodes or 1,000 computers that run the exact same Bitcoin code, right? So if a hacker wants to hack Bitcoin and change the code of the library, then they would actually have to hack 1,000 different computers out there. And that's much more difficult to do than just one computer. So like if Facebook, I wanted to hack Facebook, or if I want to hack the Malaysian government, there's one database that I need to hack into. It's a lot easier for me to hack. Whereas if there were thousands of Bitcoin nodes out there, I don't even know who are running these Bitcoin nodes. If I try and change the lines of code for your computer, then your computer will not match everyone else's, and everyone else will reject yours. So unless I can hack 1,000 different computers in a very, very short amount of time, there is no way that I can pull off this hack and convince everyone that, you know, my hacked version is the truth. It's like my example with the Quran earlier, like unless I can bribe and coordinate that bribe with thousands of people who memorize the Quran around the world in a very short amount of time, there is no way for me to convince everyone else that my version with the line Harith is handsome is the correct one.
Okay, we'll do two more questions and then we'll move back to the talk. But the first is from Abdul Rauf. If your node is able to be traced, why are we saying that the transactions are in the dark? And he's mentioning the Silk Road specifically. Yeah, can the transactions still be traced? So is it really secret?
Yeah. So anything that's done on a Bitcoin can be completely traced, whether or not, like I mentioned earlier, the address is not tied to an IC. Whether or not you can trace that address to a real person is a different story. But it is completely traceable, and that's what a lot of regulators, authorities around the world have been spending the last 10 years doing. And you'll be very surprised as to the amount of tracing that they can do. And because the entire history of the blockchain exists on the internet for anyone to see, even 20 years later, anyone can still trace that same transaction. And the moment somehow they can trace a wallet to you, or maybe it's your sister or your cousin or some friend, and they can find that person, and then they can interrogate that person and find you later. Then you're never safe. Even if 20 years later you've robbed a bank and you're like relaxing by a beach, you will never be able to be comfortable because those transactions are all completely traceable still back to you.
Okay. Kajun has a question that she wants to deliver directly.
Hi. Hello.
Hey, Kajun.
Go ahead.
Okay. I just wanted to ask you, just now you mentioned that the more processing power, the easier it is to mine or solve the problem. So to me, that is another thing is actually related to incentivizing people to on their computers so that it can work to solve the problem. But as time passes by, where is the incentive? Because the richer people, the more well-off people will continue to add on their processing power, buy more computers, buy more mining rigs to continue mining. So what is the incentive for normal people? Let's say I'm using a laptop, not even a desktop. The processing power is limited. So what do I earn from that? Why do I even want to do that? Do the mining?
Yeah. Okay. So there's two parts to this. The first part is that you'll be very surprised. Like you assume that the richest people will want to run a mining operation, right? But in reality, most rich people don't deal with mining at all. Like most of the Bitcoin whales never even bother running a miner. And it's actually very specialized kind of companies that do this. And a lot of them, actually Malaysia has a lot, where they will find like places where there are a lot of stranded energy, like let's say a hydro dam, and the electricity isn't being used and it just gets wasted. So they go and plug that to their miner to like get free or cheap energy from there. So it's actually not true that the rich people will always want to mine, because you have to spend a lot of like effort and essentially professional kind of like work to be able to create an operation that can be mining profitably. So that's one part. And the second part is that if you are a normal person, like a random guy who just wants to mine, you can actually still do that, but you would join a mining pool. So you group together with a bunch of different people out there around the world, and there will be an operator that manages the whole thing. So you'd still be able to mine and still be able to earn an income, but it will be shared across all the members of that mining pool.
Okay.
And
yeah, the number 2 question is regarding the platform. Let's say you mentioned Luno. Luno is registered in Malaysia. So is it safe? You mentioned that Luno is not a wallet. Is it safe to keep our cryptocurrencies in Luno?
So safe is a kind of subjective term. So Luno is licensed. So you can generally kind of like, if basically the government has kind of given a license to a company, then you can be kind of more comfortable that it's a legit company. Like, it's not a scam, definitely. And they've got some sort of practices in place that it's unlikely that they will sort of go bankrupt or whatever. But there are many licensed companies that their businesses fail and they go bankrupt. So just because it's licensed doesn't mean it cannot get into trouble. And I think Luno has PIDM. So it's this insurance deposit, like what you have with a bank, but it's only up to a certain amount and it's shared across all their users. So if for some reason or other Luno's business fails, then you might not be able to access your money because they went bankrupt, and the whole process of like getting out the funds might take a very long time. So
Okay. And another question. Sorry. One more question. Last question.
Okay.
Because blockchain is traceable, and Luno is actually using blockchain to store all the cryptocurrencies, can't it, let's say Luno goes bankrupt, can't we just trace our money back? Let's say this thing belongs to me. It's traceable, right? Is it doable?
No, so Luno would have one wallet on the blockchain. So from the blockchain's point of view, you have no Bitcoin because you've never
okay.
created a
Okay.
wallet on the Bitcoin blockchain. Everything is on Luno's wallet, and Luno themselves have like a database where they track, let's say, 10,000 of their users. But from the blockchain's point of view, there is no Kaju wallet. It's just the Luno wallet.
Thanks.
Okay, great. Do you want to take a sip of water and then launch?
It's fine. It's fine. I can do it.
And then in 30 minutes, we'll have another Q&A. Does that make sense to you?
Yeah, I'll try and do it before 30 minutes, as fast as I can.
Okay, great.
Okay.
You're doing great, by the way. Thanks.
Thanks for the patience, everyone. All right, so moving on. Next, we'll talk about blockchain 2.0, what that means, and we'll look at Ethereum as an example of blockchain 2.0. So if blockchain 1.0 was about decentralized money, then blockchain 2.0 is about this thing called a smart contract. And a smart contract is one of these terms that sound like jargon, that you don't know what it means. But if you think about a vending machine, for someone who was, who lived maybe 100 years ago, a vending machine is magic to them, right? Because like it's this piece of metal box and you put a piece of paper inside and you press a button and somehow it magically knows that it should give you this can of Coca-Cola. And if you put in 5 ringgit, it will give you 3 ringgit in change. And if you press the Coca-Cola button, it will give you Coca-Cola instead of Pepsi or Sprite. And for people who live in today's age, who have like some very basic understanding of programming or even just like have used Excel, then they would know that behind the scenes, what is actually happening is that there is a piece of code, what's called conditional statements or if-then functions. So basically the code will say if user enters 5 ringgit and user presses the button for Coke, then give back 3 ringgit and release 1 can from the shelf that is sort of mapped to the Coca-Cola button. So there's no magic that's going on. There's nothing super fancy. It's just simple piece of code. But that's very powerful that humans like 100 years ago were not able to do. And another buzzword that people might have heard are these things called the Internet of Things. And the stereotypical example is like if you have a fridge, a smart fridge, it can know when you are running out of eggs, for example. And when it detects that you have like not much eggs, then it can automatically send a delivery order to a nearby grocery store so that they can deliver new eggs to your house without you having to do to make the delivery. And this is also just using simple if-then function. Like there's a sensor, and if it detects that the egg placeholders are mostly empty, then it will send a transaction to a grocery store to buy eggs. But the thing with both vending machine and smart fridges is that it's still using the normal financial system. It's still using your ringgit, your US dollars. Like the fridge will have to use your credit card, and it's still tied to your bank account. But what a smart contract does is it combines the idea of decentralized money with these vending machine if-then function. So decentralized money plus if-then equals smart contracts. That's all you need to understand about smart contracts, is that it combines these two things. With Bitcoin, it's very limited in its script or in its code. So there's only so much that you can do. It's as if you have a calculator and there's only so much you can do with a calculator, even though it's a computer. You can't play video games or watch movies. Maybe there are certain like fancy things that you can, like if you have a fancy TI-84 kind of calculator, you can do certain fancy things, but it's limited in what it can do. It's not meant to do more than just calculating numbers. So having a smart contracts enabled allows a blockchain to basically superpower itself, to be able to do much more than just simply transferring and receiving money. Now it can do many other things. So yeah, another example is if you can imagine I don't know if maybe some people here are not old enough, but like back a few years ago, there were these things called a flip phone. And and you can have some games, you can have a camera, but it's very limited as to the amount of apps that you have there. And then when the iPhone got introduced with the iStore, with the iTunes App Store, now anyone can create an app for the iPhone. It doesn't have to be just the, let's say, the Sony Ericsson kind of company that creates these apps. Apple can get any random guy or girl from Malaysia or India to like program an app, and they can list it on the App Store and sell it or even give it for free. So then that just kind of like opens up a whole world of things that you can do with a phone that you were never able to do before. So that's the kind of analogy for the shift from 1.0 to blockchain 2.0. You can do a lot more than just simply transferring and receiving money. A common example that Malaysians would really like is that, maybe a few years ago, there were big complaints about how, if you go to the voting booth in an election, you might put in your slip of paper where you mark, let's say, X for the red team instead of the blue team. And you never know, some blackout might happen or some hanky-panky is happening behind the scenes where your vote has been changed from red to blue. And you have to trust the election commission to do these things properly, and they may not inspire that much trust. So you can imagine a scenario where you have a blockchain with the smart contracts enabled, and let's say you wanted to vote. You can kind of just go to a website and you can kind of choose the team that you're voting for and click confirm. A normal website, you can still argue, I don't know what's happening because I don't know the code behind the scenes. Maybe they're changing the code somehow. So even if I click on the blue button, it's actually pointing to the red or vice versa. But if there was a blockchain and it had these if-then functions, so it would check, okay, if Harith is above 21, he is registered to vote and he's voting for a specific constituency. And most importantly, he hasn't voted in this election yet. And only if these conditions are met, then we allow Harith to add his vote. And then if I go back home, I can go online and check a block explorer and I can see that, okay, my vote for the red team is still pointing to the red team. And because there are thousands of computers out there that are verifying this, I can trust these thousands of computers instead of trusting just one election commission database out there. So that kind of enables us as a society, as voters, to be much more confident in the system instead of trusting one kind of like close-ended hidden party. We can trust like thousands of our fellow citizens who would verify these things as well. Just to be clear, this is an example. In reality, blockchains are nowhere near ready for elections or voting. So if someone tells you that, it's probably a lot of salesy stuff that they're telling you. But in future, these things can be possible. So I'll go through some use cases of these smart contracts and what you can do. So for those of you who are around in the crypto space or you were listening to it in 2018, 2017 era, there were these things called ICOs. And this is essentially, it's a pun or a play on the IPO word, like initial public offering, when companies go public. So this is when an initial coin offering is when a project like sells their coin and you can buy it, and that coin can have many different uses. I would say that, and especially over time, it's shown that 99% of these have been proven to be scams. I mean, I'm just making up this number, but it's a huge amount. And 99% of them, if they haven't already, have probably failed or will probably fail. So I'm not talking about how to make money from ICOs, how to do that. But what I am talking about is what it has enabled. So this use case of the technology has enabled you as a random person to be able to invest in what might be the next Google or Alibaba, where in kind of the real world, there is no way you'd have been able to invest in Google when it was still just barely starting out. Only when they've gone public, when the value has gone up by 1,000 times, then only you're able to buy and support the Google sort of business to grow. And vice versa, if you were building the next Google and you just happen to be some random guy in Malaysia, you don't have connections to very rich or well-connected VCs in Silicon Valley or in Shanghai, in the normal world, it might be very hard for you to be able to raise the money that you need to create your next Google at a valuation that you're comfortable with. But with ICOs, you can sell to anyone in the world. Like they just need internet and a blockchain wallet, and they can immediately access your fundraising. So it opens up the space for you to be able to raise capital for your business much more easily. And it uses much superior technology and user experience compared to raising funds in the real world. And it's not some theoretical example I'm giving. I've participated in completely licensed equity crowdfunding platforms, and I've given money to their Maybank account that they showed me on their website. And like in this particular case, like when I transferred to them, the next day they emailed me and they said that by the time I transferred, their allocation had been filled and they cannot accept my money anymore because that's the only amount that they're looking to raise. And they said that they would refund me my money. And I waited and waited and waited, and only a month afterwards did I get back my my money. And if it wasn't because it was a licensed company by the Securities Commission, I would be like completely panicking about where my money had went. I would assume that it's been taken away from me, or the people have run away with it. And in reality, it's not because the company are like doing any hanky-panky, but it's because there are many different gatekeepers that they need to go through, like different finance departments, different like accounting or tax or whatever, and they're all done manually. And at each step, it would take a few days. And in the end, it would take a month to send that money back to me. Whereas if I were to do an ICO on, let's say, the Ethereum blockchain, then because of the smart contracts, the conditional statements that are done on the code, it can check that, okay, Harith has transferred, let's say one example, I've transferred more than the amount that I was supposed to transfer. And they also check that I've done my KYC, I've registered my identification, and only if these conditions are met, then they will accept my payment and they will give me these new coins that they have created. And because I transferred more than necessary, more than the ceiling, they will also actually automatically refund the money that I sent them. And this is all done via smart contract code, such that it takes literally minutes, if not seconds, for that transaction to complete. There's no human being that needs to check whether the transaction was done correctly or not. So like instead of taking me a month to get a refund, I can get it done within minutes or seconds. And in reality, there are many different projects out there, mostly blockchain projects who've done ICOs, or it comes in different names, but essentially the same idea. You can see like they've raised multi-millions, even billions of dollars using ICO technology. And it enables them to get investors from not just a small group of VCs or venture capital providers, but also from the average man on the street. And these investors can also be their community members, people who can support their ecosystem. So you get a lot more like people who would support you instead of just these small groups of investors. Another example is what's called a decentralized autonomous organization. Again, very jargony kind of word. The short acronym for it is DAO. And to think of this, you can imagine, let's say an Uber or Grab, and in both cases, they've both experimented with driverless cars. So these are cars where there's no driver there. It's completely automated. It will send you from point A to point B without a human being driving you around. So a DAO is, if you can imagine, Uber, not just without any drivers, but without any human beings. It's a company that's run completely via code. So let's say this car, it will take you in as a passenger. It will send you point A to point B. You will pay it with your blockchain wallet, and it will automatically receive your payment and send you any change automatically. And let's say every 6 months or 10,000 kilometers, it knows to send itself to a partnering workshop where the workshop will do servicing for their car. And once they've done that, the payment again is done automatically via the smart contract code, and then they will go back to driving passengers around. And this idea is completely crazy. It doesn't make any sense. And it's nowhere close to being done in the real world today. But with this smart contract capable blockchains, this is not this science fiction thing anymore. Like, you can see how it can work conceptually, because the smart contract code enables you to be able to do that. There's a lot of things that people still need to develop, still need to build, but the building blocks are in place already. And there are many companies, or I wouldn't even call them companies, like more like projects, because it's just random people on the internet who've come together and created these DAOs. And these DAOs even power like billions of dollars of wealth moving through their platforms. And there is no company, there is no legal entity that represents them. It's just a bunch of people on the internet, you know, on some Reddit forum or some Discord channel. Another example is what's called DeFi, and DeFi is short for decentralized finance. It's a pun on defying your traditional finance. And all of these kind of logos are real companies or projects that are already existing. Some of them are also DAOs. And like almost anything you can think of that exists in the financial space in the real world already exists on the blockchain. So whether it's lending or insurance or derivatives or payments, there are already a bunch of different companies out there that are doing these things. And it's a completely different world, because you don't have to have a person that you're dealing with. It's all done via code. So I literally can open up my blockchain wallet. I can, let's say, exchange Ether for Bitcoin without having to go through Luno, which is a company with human beings. I just use a smart contract and it will automatically exchange my currency for me. And I don't have to trust any human being, any third party to hold my money for me the way I would have to do with Luno. It's all done automatically using code. And only when a transaction happens, it will take, let's say, Ether from my wallet and send Bitcoin to my wallet. And I was mentioning decentralized exchange. So the most popular example is what's called Uniswap. It's the screenshot I'm showing here. It's a specific kind of decentralized exchange called an automated market maker. I'm not going to go into that. But this is also a really cool thing with Uniswap, is not just that you can exchange currencies like Bitcoin and Ether, or even US dollars nowadays. Not only are you a user where you can swap the currencies, but you can also provide liquidity. So you kind of not an owner per se, but you can earn from this. So imagine if you are familiar with Bursa Malaysia, which is the Malaysian stock market. Not only are you buying, let's say, your Maybank shares, but you can also, if you have Maybank shares and you have ringgit, you can provide that liquidity, and other people will be trading using the shares that you provided. And whenever they trade, they will pay a transaction fee or an exchange fee, and that fee goes to you. So you literally can earn money from like contributing to an exchange. Instead of just being a user that uses the services, you can also be a contributor and be paid an income for providing those services. And a very cool thing about Uniswap also is that, so the team is based in the US, and they have to follow US regulations. So the US government actually blocked them from providing their services to people in Iran. And they had to follow those rules, so they blocked their website from being accessed by people in Iran. But because the smart contract is on the blockchain, it doesn't matter what website you use to interact with the smart contract. A lot of people created dozens of mirror copies. So if anyone's familiar with your torrents or illegal streaming websites, and you know that you can pop up many different versions of the same website. And all of these different websites still point to the same Uniswap smart contract, such that anyone in Iran can still use Uniswap, even though the US government has blocked the company Uniswap from providing services to Iranians. So there are, with smart contracts and blockchains, you can have complete financial services that cannot be stopped by anyone, cannot be censored, cannot be blocked by any government or corporation or any institution. All right. So yeah, so we'll go into NFTs. I think those are just a couple examples. There are many other more, but I wouldn't have time to go through all of them. We do want to touch a little bit of NFTs. So yeah, so you might have heard about non-fungible tokens. What does that mean? Why are people like going so crazy about them?
Another 15 minutes. Okay.
Yeah. Okay. Thanks, Greg. We should be able to do it in 15 minutes. It's nice art sometimes, and sometimes it's like super simple pixel art. But how come these things can sell for thousands or millions of dollars? Is the question that people ask. So to answer this question, we first go outside of technical crypto or blockchain stuff. You think about these Nike Air Jordan shoes. If anyone's familiar, like some of these shoes, like there are like unique series that come out that there's only like 100 pairs of this particular shoe, and people would pay thousands of dollars to buy one pair of these Air Jordan shoes, and they would never wear them. They would just put it in a nice glass case and just display it at home, and they get a sense of fulfillment, a sense of that they are one of a unique group of people that own this particular Nike Air Jordans. And it doesn't make sense from a functional point of view because you never even wear that shoe. That shoe isn't any better at protecting your feet than other shoes out there. But people still want to collect these kinds of shoes and would bid like thousands of dollars for them. So the similar kind of mindset exists for these NFT that people are going crazy over. So the main idea is that it's essentially bragging rights that you get from being able to say that you own a particular unique or rare collectible. Same with like fine art, that you can say that you own, say the original copy of the Mona Lisa, even if someone else like does a perfect replica of the Mona Lisa and they store it at home. But if you know that that's not the real Mona Lisa, you won't pay anywhere near the same amount of money for that piece of painting. So the painting, there is some value from the art, but a big chunk of the value for fine art comes from its rarity, from its scarceness that other people can't have access to. And especially when you are newly rich. So, you were a normal person, you bought Ether when it was $1, now it's $4,000. So now let's say, you have $400 million. For you, it's chump change because, you paid a very small amount for it to begin with. So now you are very rich, you have a lot of financial capital, but you don't necessarily have social capital. Like people don't necessarily respect you in the society. So if you can buy certain things that signal to the rest of the world that, hey, you are, you own a piece of culture that is very rare or limited in edition, and you own that, then people will give a lot more respect to you as a kind of a member of society. And again, this doesn't just happen with NFTs. It also happens with any fine art, with any newly rich person who wants to be cultured and be accepted in the higher echelons of society. One way you would do it is by sponsoring or providing patronage for a very up and coming artist whose work of arts might be like very well received and become a meme in that particular society. So there are many other use cases for NFTs. It's not just art, even though that's what 99% of people seem to care about right now. Because non-fungible tokens, all it does is that it creates scarcity in a digital space. So in a digital world where everything is fungible, and fungible just means like if you have a ringgit, you can always exchange it for another piece of paper that is also a ringgit. Fungible means you can exchange like for like very easily. Whereas if you have a car, even if it's the exact same model, you may not want to exchange it like for like, because there might be some emotional attachment. You might have done some modifications to your car and so on. Or even a cat, right? Like a cat is a cat, but you can have like an expensive $1,000 cat. You can have like a stray cat that you get for free. Even though they are both cats, they are not fungible because they're two very different things. in the digital world, everything is non-fungible by nature because you can right-click copy, you can create many different copies of the same thing. But when you put something on the blockchain, or the proof of that thing on the blockchain, and you tie it to a certain asset, then as long as you trust the creator of the asset, then you know that this is the only copy that is out there, or that is authenticated by the creator to be the only copy out there. And then you can create uniqueness or non-fungibility where it has never been able to exist in the real world beforehand. So there are many use cases. So for example, one is like this Ethereum Infinite Garden is a documentary. I actually did some fundraising for this, and you actually receive an NFT, it's basically like a badge to show that, hey, I am one of the people who contributed to this documentary. And when they release it, they'll put credits and my name will show up there because I have this NFT to prove it. There are also, another thing that's very almost synonymous with NFTs nowadays, and if you've been following the news with Facebook, who call themselves Meta nowadays, there's this whole idea of a metaverse. For those of you who are old enough to remember Second Life, which is like a game, like a virtual world, with those kinds of things, you can buy a house, but it's all just an entry in Second Life's database. You still have to trust them, and if they wanted to, they can still block you and censor you from accessing that same house. But if that house is put on the blockchain as an NFT, then no company can take that away from you because that NFT will always be there. And a cool thing with this is that, let's imagine there are 10 different games or 10 different virtual reality platforms out there. And somehow they all decide to use a particular blockchain and they enable you to use any assets that you have on a blockchain on their platform. Then you could, let's say, if you buy a house, you can have a house in this game, and it's, let's say, in game A and in virtual reality B, both houses are attached to the NFT that you own. It's like the same house can exist in many different universes in the metaverse. So that's something that NFTs have enabled. Another example is domain names. So you can imagine with the DNS, the domain name service for websites, computers don't care about your Harith.com as a website. They just look at 192.191 kind of code. So similarly with blockchain wallets, you can see that very long string of random characters, which no human can really remember. But you could buy these domain names. So I could buy Harith.eth or Harith.eth. And then anyone can know if they transfer any amounts to Harith.eth, that it will go to me, as long as they know that I own Harith.eth. And a very cool thing I mentioned at the very start, if people like Twitter and Discord support these things, then you can have a unique identity, Harith.eth, and that's shared across all these different social sites. And you don't have to trust your data with that site anymore. Your data can be held to you and your domain name. So my Harith.eth can show my Ethereum address, my Bitcoin address, even my picture that I want to tie to that name. And that thing can be applied to any number of different social sites. So that I never have to share my data with those sites. It's still tied to my blockchain address that I own and I control. There's also gaming. I'm sure some people here at least would have heard of Axie Infinity. I know a lot of students have been playing this game and earning a lot of money. It's kind of a cool story. This was 2020 when it wasn't such a big deal. There were people in the Philippines who made money from playing this game. They didn't necessarily have jobs because of COVID, but they could make little bits of money to pay for their families. So in the gaming space, you can think of instead of relying on big game publishers, you can create your own indie platforms and you can make it such that the users can earn from playing that game. So that now they have an incentive to play that game, not just because it's fun, but because they can actually make a living from playing it. This is a local project actually. I don't know if people have heard, KitaJaga.co. It's actually a platform for you to donate to people in need without going through any kind of like NGOs or companies out there. You can donate directly and people who need help can literally just like put it up on the website. And they've done this project where if you were donating, if you were a donor, they would actually give you a unique NFT to say that, hey, this guy was a donor, and it has its own like unique art. So it's a way to kind of like put on a blockchain that's immutable, that cannot be changed, proof that you have donated to this good cause. So there is a certain badge that you can use. And imagine if a website like LinkedIn accepts these kinds of badges, then you can show or prove to a potential employer, and they don't have to trust just your name, your word for it, because there is a blockchain with thousands of people that are validating. They know that, okay, this person, let's say this young lady has done a lot of volunteer work helping pets and so on, and so they can be much more comfortable with you, with your character, as to someone that they would want to hire. This is another platform that's also got a lot of Malaysians within the project. So it's got it's creating NFTs but with traits, and so you can give traits to your NFTs. So let's say you can make it be able to be combined with other NFTs to be able to, let's say, access a special day with Steve Aoki, or get special discounts or things like that. So it's not just a piece of art. You can also like attach use cases to it that the creator can provide. So in short, if Bitcoin was decentralized money, then Ethereum is about creating decentralized apps or applications. It's also not just simple money, but it's also programmable money. You can do all kinds of things, like I mentioned, like providing liquidity to an exchange. You can like provide insurance to other people, all programmatically without any human being. And my favorite way to describe Ethereum, or just blockchain 2.0 smart contract blockchains, is its unstoppable applications. So you think back the example of Uniswap, like even if the most powerful government in the world wants to block people from using a particular platform, they cannot do it because the smart contract exists. There's no, even if they block 100 websites, anyone can pop up a new website out there that other people can use. So very quickly, some local companies and communities. So I mentioned Etherscan, that's where I work. CoinGecko is another Malaysian company that is amongst the top websites of the world. These two companies are what I would say the pride of Malaysia. Like the whole world uses them, even though many Malaysians might not be aware. And I would say, especially for the students here, like both are actively hiring like crazy, like trying to hire for all kinds of roles. So whether you're a technical person or not technical, you're on a full-time job or just an internship, please reach out. I mean, for Etherscan, definitely you can reach out to me. Even for CoinGecko, I can link you up with the team members there. There's also some other projects. So like Ribbon Finance is run by two Malaysian founders, even though they're based in Singapore now. And they're also one of the biggest DeFi applications that are used out there. There's KitaJaga.co that I mentioned earlier. There's Blocklime that does a lot of training for smart contract development. And there's Luxtag, which is another Malaysian company, and their business is about like tracking, like proving provenance of products. So imagine like your Prada handbag, like for you to know that it's a real Prada handbag, the Prada can put a stamp to it, like an NFT to it, and then it's on the blockchain, so you can see that your actual bag is a real Prada handbag and not like a fake ripoff. There's also like not companies, but like communities. So I mentioned I run Ethereum Malaysia. There's also Bitcoin Malaysia, which is I think a Facebook group with like, I think today I have probably like 70,000 members. There's other groups like a G1 group, is like a very close curated Telegram groups with some of the biggest whales in Malaysia. Access Malaysia is a group that's representing the local space when we're talking to banks or the government. So it's an association that represents the space. Then there's some local NFT communities for those of you who are artists and so on. These two groups have been very active, especially over the last year. And they've helped a lot of people who know nothing about NFTs to like create their own art and make a lot of money from this. All right, so a very quick note on cultures. So some very important things to note is that when you are talking to any person who is in the crypto or blockchain space, it's very easy for them to say a lot of fancy stuff, and you can never tell how how real they are, especially when you're new and you don't really understand basic concepts. Hopefully, some of the concepts we covered today can help you kind of filter out some of the statements that people make. But one thing to note is that a lot of people will say, oh, you should buy this coin or that coin because it's going to change the world or whatever. One thing you want to know is that in a lot of cases, they have their own bags in this coin. So basically, they've bought a lot of this coin. So it's in their best interest to tell you to buy that coin, because then when more people buy, the price of that coin will go higher. And so their investment gets better. So you always want to filter if any friend or uncle goes and tells you about this best coin that has never existed before. Like, kind of like filter whatever they tell you with how much money they have personally put in there, and therefore an incentive for them to tell you to buy. Beyond that, you can also think of like there's a scale when it comes to the crypto culture. That is the group that is very intransigent or very rigid about their idea of what blockchains can do. And there is the group that is extremely sort of experimental, who think that blockchains can do everything in the whole world. So it's a spectrum. So everyone's always somewhere along that line. But at the very extreme ends, the rigid side will say that blockchain, or basically Bitcoin, because basically they are all like hardcore Bitcoin only people, and they will say blockchains can only be used for hard money. That means money that cannot be printed out of thin air without or changed in its monetary policy or its like rate of inflation in supply. And you cannot use it for anything else. No games, no music, no nothing. It's just for hard money. And why they say this is because when you limit your blockchain, there's no smart contract capability, there's no fancy stuff, then the amount of code is very limited. So the surface area for attacks or hacks is much more limited as well. So people can be much more confident about what's happening because they can see the entire surface area. Whereas at the very extreme end, on the other end of the spectrum, are the people who want to use blockchains for anything in the whole world, for games, for videos, for social networks, and so on. And they want to use smart contracts for more and more complicated or complex things. And when you do this, like the surface area of the code or of attack gets much more complicated. I don't know what this shape is. I think something like a tetrahedron or something. Like, because there are much more nooks and corners in the shape, it's harder for you to keep track of everything that's going on. And a hacker or an attacker can find some small unknown corner to you and do some fancy hacks to it. So if you follow the DeFi space, for example, there's been millions of dollars that have been hacked. And it's not like, for example, Ethereum that has been hacked, but it's these applications that have been hacked because they're using some very complicated code that even the creators weren't aware of the vulnerabilities that existed. Yeah, so it's very important. Like, if someone tells you like, oh, everything else is a scam, you should only buy Bitcoin, you want to understand where they're coming from. They might be those people who are at the extreme end of the rigid side. And for those who are like, saying we can do everything in the world on blockchain, you also want to like temper whatever you hear with this understanding that, blockchains are still new, it's still in many cases untested or barely tested. So you want to like qualify what they say with how kind of exuberant they are about what blockchains are and can be. So lastly is the so what. So why should any of this matter to you who's listening to this right now? So one thing to note is it's a completely technology that redefines a lot of things in the world. I've given some examples. There are many other examples out there. A lot of people would equate what the internet did for communication back in the 90s is what blockchain will do, not just for finance, but also for many other industries out there. Just imagine like the idea of being able to talk to someone across the world or like in kind of video call like we're doing now was like hard to imagine once upon a time, but the internet has enabled that. And so blockchains can enable a lot of new things that you cannot even imagine today, not just in finance, but in many other spaces out there. You also want to know that it's a potential investment and potentially high return, has been high return for many people, but it's also extremely high risk. We would always caution or advise people never to put in any money that you cannot afford to lose, and always try and understand what the technology is first before you do any investment. People, again, similarly will equate to like investing in a blockchain cryptocurrency, like how you might be able to invest in Google stock in the 90s. Like nowadays, someone who bought Google would be like 1,000 times richer. But some people might have not bought Google. They might have bought, I don't know, Netscape or some company that didn't make it. And then, all their investments have like completely gone up in smoke. Or they might have bought Yahoo, which, still did well, but not nearly as well as Google did. So with blockchain technology in general, like you might invest in different parts of it. Some of it, I would be very confident will change the world in the future. But I cannot say, nobody knows for sure. Maybe the particular cryptocurrency that you buy doesn't do well and others do better. Or maybe the entire industry as a whole doesn't live up to its potential because it's still very new, still very untested. Some experts used to say the internet will not be any better than the fax machine. They've been proven wrong, but similar critics may not be proven wrong for blockchain. We'll never know until we actually kind of try and find out. And lastly, especially if you're younger, think about how it impacts your career. Like if there's any industry out there that can have any kind of automation based on minimizing trust in different third parties, then the blockchain space will at some point disrupt the technology. I came from the finance space. I worked at an insurance company before. I personally think, and I've told my friends this, that I think in 5 to 10 years, that whole DeFi space will completely disrupt your insurance or banks. And if you were working there as some middle management person or what, then your job might become obsolete in 10 years time. So understand what the technology is, understand how it works, so that at some point, when it comes to your door, you are prepared to adjust or to adapt to that new reality. And lastly is a call to action for everyone listening is to help the community grow. Once upon a time, there were real risk of the internet being stuck in closed walled gardens. There might have been like a Netscape internet or a Yahoo internet. And even today, there are like a lot of parts of the internet that are walled away. Like you have your Facebook and your Twitter, and they control a lot of users' data, or even like news sites that you have to pay to be able to read. Like these are all walled gardens. And it actually took a lot of effort from normal people like you and me to fight for a public and open internet. And similarly with blockchains, like it needs a lot of effort from people like you and me to fight for an open, public, permissionless blockchain. There are people like companies like Facebook who want to create their own DM chain that is like closed to their own circle of associates. And there are like government blockchains or central bank digital currencies that are still kind of like retaining a lot of the power to mint new supply in a closed circle of people. And it takes a lot of effort from people to fight for open permissionless blockchains. So whether you are a programmer or a designer, if you come from any industry, if you're an academic or you're a regulator, like it's down to people like us to fight for a truly public and permissionless blockchain space. And yeah, how you can do that is you could join Ethereum Malaysia. So this is my pitch. Like we're not a for-profit in any way. We're just a meetup group of community members. Some who are very like experienced and well-known even in the space. So you could learn from them and contribute in your own way. And I mentioned job opportunities. So both Etherscan, where I work, and even CoinGecko, like we're hiring for all kinds of roles. There are many different roles out there. It's not even all of them listed. And even if you want to get an internship, you can talk to me. And yeah, to review, so we covered the preamble before we talk about blockchain, the sort of common terms, money, decentralization. We talked about blockchain 1.0 features and blockchain 2.0 features, especially smart contracts and some of its use cases, and some local companies, communities, and so what. So if you can't remember anything else from the talk, and you want to kind of like use the blockchain or buy some crypto, just remember these three things. Blockchains are not anonymous. You are your own security, and that exchanges are not wallets. And there are many, many other topics we can go down further into the rabbit hole. We can do hands-on workshops to set up wallets or to use these decentralized applications. We can understand more different use cases or many other different concepts. Blockchain 3.0 to me is a huge thing. Even many people in the space are not fully aware. So yeah, the rest is entirely up to you, what you want to learn. I hope this provides some core basic concepts so that whatever you read or watch online, you have some sort of framework to rely on to understand. And if you're not sure about anything, feel free to join the Ethereum Malaysia group. We have Telegram groups, we have a Twitter account, and you can ask any questions, and I'm sure many people in the community are more than happy to help. So yeah, thanks a lot, everyone. And I guess we can go to questions.
Thank you so much. Okay, we have time for a few questions. So Eugene wanted to ask a question.
Yep. Hi, Harith.
Yo.
Hopefully you can hear me. I hope I'm not too laggy because my internet is not great. Okay, so my question is, I've just recently got into making some NFTs and setting up my account with OpenSea. So my question is, because when you in the whole process, we are always I find myself encountering a lot of numbers and phrases, and there's so much I don't know what is safe and what's not safe. So is the secret key you mentioned earlier, the string of alphanumerical numbers, is it similar to the secret phrase we get when we set up the MetaMask wallet, which are a whole bunch of like 7 or 8 words? Because we are told that that is the one that is really, you have to write it down on paper and you have to keep it safe. Is that similar or actually the same as a secret key? That's my question.
So it's a very good question. It's actually the same thing. So the private key in that alphanumerical string, these what's called a seed phrase, the 12 words or 24 words that you get from a MetaMask or any like crypto wallet, it's actually a representation of those strings. Like there is some, I guess the right way to describe it is like some sort of encoding that is just a different format. Those 12 words are representative of whatever those strings of characters. So yeah, definitely keep your 12 words safe. Never trust it with anyone. Yeah. Even your mom or dad. If you think that they might take some of your wealth. Yeah, and so also with your MetaMask, like if you have it on your phone or on your browser, like make sure you never expose it, like you never lose your phone. And also something very important, a lot of people don't realize this, is that in many cases that have been reported, there have been malware that goes through your computer. So basically virus, and those viruses can be very smart. They can detect if you are sort of entering your seed phrase on MetaMask, then it knows, like if you open MetaMask and you've entered 12 words, it will capture those 12 words and it will share it to its creator. And now they have your private key, and they can get everything inside your wallet. There's many different kinds of like these kind of phishing tricks that exist. So there's probably a whole talk by themselves, but yeah, just be very careful about access to your device that has the crypto wallet. And if possible, you use like a hardware wallet, like I mentioned earlier, so that it's much more difficult for someone to hack into a hardware wallet. Yeah.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Oh, and use a password manager where possible. Like there are many different ones like LastPass, like 1Password, and never recycle your passwords across different websites.
Right.
or like with your wallet, because yeah, that's one recipe for getting hacked if you use the same password for everything.
Okay, that's a good piece of advice.
A question on the chat was, should we assume everything in crypto is taxed? I mean, so if it's known, if it's traceable, it's taxable.
Yeah, so in Malaysia right now, the LHDN have said that there is no, first of all, there's no capital gains tax. So if you invested whether in crypto or in stocks, and you know, a year or 2 years later you sell for a profit, there's no tax for that in Malaysia, at least at this point. There is an income tax, and LHDN hasn't been very clear on a framework or a standard for this. But what they've said is that if you are doing something and that is your income, then you need to pay tax for it. So for example, if you are constantly trading crypto, or if you sell an NFT, then technically speaking, you should be paying tax on the profits that you get. So like, you know, you have your revenues and you have your costs. So, so for example, if you're trading, then, you know, you are buying at a certain price and you're selling at a certain price and you have to pay fees. So you can deduct all the costs, but the leftover, if there is a profit, you should report it to LHDN. Whether or not they can trace it or they notice enough to trace it is a different story, but they have been clear that if you do it as an income, whether trading or selling NFTs, then you need to report that as tax. Yeah.
Okay, just okay. First, a note to everybody: if you peel out now in the next few minutes, please do the exit poll, so that we, particularly if you want to continue this discussion and want to get more information either about CFAR or about cryptos and NFTs. Okay, I have a question.
Sure.
Two actually. One is about the environmental issue and how can we ameliorate the sheer amount of heat dispersed by the machines, you know, that we are using. In other words, the amount of electricity being used. And the second one is, okay, I shouldn't trust my uncle and his advice. So who do I trust in getting neutral information about what coin, what NFT, et cetera, you know, neutral information about, yeah, I guess probably about coins. Yeah.
So I think the first question, I'll take the first question first, and this is actually quite there's a long answer, like it can be a whole topic in itself. And
we'll do that in we're doing a how to do session next, and then we will do this critical section. So we will be coming back to this, but I should deal with it a bit now. Yeah.
Yeah. But so the short answer is that so there's three parts. The first part is that if, and this is a certain kind of ideological part to this, like if you believe that a decentralized currency, a decentralized money that isn't owned by any government or bank or corporation, if you think that that is meaningful to have for humans, then you might be okay with the sort of the energy use that is done by Bitcoin. Like having a form of money where like someone in Palestine can escape sort of the economic hardships that they face and carry over any wealth that they have across the world without any government or bank like blocking them or charging them extra fees. If you think that that's important, then the energy use is not that much, because if you compare that with any financial fiat system out there, any country's like national currency, the amount of energy used for Bitcoin pales in comparison to any government's spending on their bureaucracy, their military, their government, their banking system, all those pieces of paper, all those electricity that the bills that they pay, all those things are what's needed to make sure that your fiat money runs. So Bitcoin as much as it is spending now, is not spending nearly as much as any of the major fiat currencies out there. So it comes down to a question of, do you think it's valuable for humanity to have a decentralized money?
Okay.
That's the first part.
Yeah, yeah, just taking that just a bit further. But in real terms, from the point of view of the Earth, not the point of view of us, is there a way of ameliorating the amount of energy used? Are there ways of doing it which are less destructive than others?
Yeah. So okay. So the second part that I was coming to is, yeah, you can. So Bitcoin uses proof of work. Ethereum also at the moment, but there are blockchains out there that use different consensus mechanisms. Like a common one that is referred to is proof of stake. So proof of stake doesn't use nearly as much energy as proof of work. I think there was one estimate recently that so Ethereum is transitioning from proof of work to proof of stake. That there's an estimate that when they do that, they will use up like 99.5% less energy than proof of work. So that's the 2 orders of magnitude less energy use than Bitcoin, for example. So that's another part. So you could use different consensus mechanisms, and again, that's a completely different topic in itself of the pros and cons of proof of work versus proof of stake. But there are blockchains out there that are already running using proof of stake, and they're not using up nearly as much energy as Bitcoin.
Which one?
So that's
which one?
There's a lot of them. So Ethereum, like I said, is not yet, but has been planning to do it. There's Avalanche, Solana, Tezos. I know most of the more modern blockchains will use proof of stake compared to proof of work. I would say even amongst the top cryptocurrencies out there that have their own blockchains, majority of them are probably proof of stake.
Okay.
Okay, and a third part is even the proof of work, and I don't necessarily buy into this argument, but even proof of work sort of cryptocurrencies or blockchains, you naturally create an incentive for whoever the miner is to find cheap and renewable sources of energy. And this is actually like documented, like many of the most profitable miners would set up shop, let's say near a hydroelectric dam. And the energy that is created by that dam is wasted because there's not enough sort of like channels to take the electricity created from the dam to other places or to store it near enough storage to store the electricity. So when you are a miner, you are actually using up this wasted electricity. So you're actually incentivizing people to make use of stranded electricity out there. There's actually a very popular mining pool that's actually closed now, but very recently, but they were started in China, and it was just a bunch of normal people like you and me, just like enthusiasts about Ethereum. And they just decided to create a mining pool. A group of them set up their own miners, and a lot of the younger people would like go back to their hometown, and like some parts of China would have like these windmills that would generate a lot of electricity. But because it's in some remote part of China that you don't have any way to transfer the electricity anywhere else, the locals would just like connect it to a miner, and whenever there's electricity that's like generated from the windmill, they would just like direct it to the miner and they will turn it on for it to mine. And when the season is not windy, then they'll just shut down the miner. And by doing that, they actually were able to fund the entire villages and use those like profits to like kind of develop their local villages and hometowns. So there is an argument that can be made that by having these kind of like need for energy or electricity, cheap energy for mining proof of work, then you are actually incentivizing people to find these cheap and renewable sources of energy, and then you like encourage innovation in finding and using renewables as a way to generate electricity.
Okay, we're about to wrap up, but there are a few questions which have been sitting on the chat for a while. One is sorry, how to pass your assets to loved ones. So I'll read them all, so we have you have them, and then we can answer them, maybe chunk them together. Okay, when buying or selling NFT, should we still do it on Ethereum blockchain, or which has very high gas fee, or choose other blockchains like Polygons? And then another question is, if you have put some money into Bitcoin or Ethereum, is that taxable because it's been outside the normal monetary system for a period of time? Let's see, is there anything else?
Maybe I can answer those, because I probably will forget if there's a long list of questions.
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay, so the question from Terence about using Polygon instead of Ethereum. This is actually very interesting. And there's no right or wrong answer. Let's imagine you're trying to sell your own NFT. How I would describe it is like cheaper chains like Polygon, like Binance Smart Chain. And actually there is a local Malaysian platform called pentas.io that helps you sell these NFTs. And I think they're on Binance Smart Chain, BSC, and they will also add Polygon soon, I think. So you can sell these art on these chains, but it's kind of like you are selling your art, let's say at a pasar malam versus at a high-end art gallery. It's cheaper to go to your pasar malam, to set up a stall there and sell, but the audience would typically be sort of people with lower income. So if you sell an NFT on Polygon or BSC, then generally the buyers would also or the market rates will also be lower. Like you don't sell your expensive art at a pasar malam. You sell like your kind of local kind of like neighborhood friendly drawings. Whereas if you want to sell at like a expensive art gallery, then it costs a lot to be able to even like get a ticket to go in. But the people who might be buying from you are people with very deep pockets and are willing to pay like the millions and so on. So generally, what I would say is, if you do on BSC or Polygon, it's cheaper for you to list, but generally you don't expect expensive amounts from the buyers. Whereas if you do it on Ethereum, it's extremely expensive. I have to mention that to create the art and to list it and basically pay all the gas fees. But your potential market is of a kind of different economic background, like different amounts that they are more than happy to spend on. Okay, so the next one is the one about declaring your income if you hold it in ringgit, in Ethereum. I don't think this matters, because like if you were to earn in US dollars as well, like let's say you design a website for someone, they pay you in USD, but if you are a Malaysian resident, you're still supposed to pay tax. Like you can convert at whatever the exchange rate is from USD to ringgit, and you pay the ringgit equivalent. So the same as Ethereum, like you can convert the rate and you just pay your ringgit without selling off your Ether. So that's the same thing here. Whether or not you do it, and whether or not LHDN catches you and demands you pay a certain amount, no one can say, but the law is that you're supposed to pay tax.
Okay, so back to my uncle question.
Yes.
Is there an online journal? Is there a place where there's some what we might call neutral or honest information, which is not leaning toward the that person making profit. So it's a more journalistic ethic. Yeah.
Well, what I would say is that, I mean, even with the news media like nowadays, right? Like whether it's local or international, is there such a thing as a neutral platform, or is everyone trying to push their own agenda? I would argue the latter. So if you're looking for sources of information for the blockchain or crypto space, what I would suggest is get involved with the local space and not the kind of the trader groups. Get involved with like people like Ethereum Malaysia, if I'm allowed to say stuff like that, like people who've been in the space and their kind of credibility, like they're not here to make a quick buck or to sell you stuff. They're more interested to learn and to build. So that's one. I personally, where I get my news, whether it's crypto or just normal news, it's just from Twitter. So I pre-filter who I follow on Twitter, and like, because I know the person that I'm following is like an honest or well-known contributor to the space. So if there's any news that they share, then it's much more likely that it is like accurate and it's neutral. And I also have to be careful, like not to just follow a certain kind of group or line of thinking, because you don't want to be in this echo chamber. So try and balance with like people from different kind of like sides in any particular kind of topic. But yeah, if you use Twitter and you curate who you follow, you cut out a lot of the noise that comes from, from the media and all these other sources.
Okay. I think that we should probably end there. So thank you so much. And people have the address of the space that you're helping to run and organize. So yeah, that people should come to that, and also yeah, do their research on Twitter and get into the game by simply crunching information as much as possible.
Yeah.
So thank you to you, and thank you to everybody who has come to the event. We greatly appreciate your presence.
Yeah, so if there are any questions that haven't been answered, feel free to find me on Twitter. I'm Harith K17, or on Telegram, same username. Or you can join the ETHKL Telegram groups and ask these questions. We'd be more than happy to share. And as I mentioned, I do work for Etherscan, and I'm taking some of my time. So if anyone's interested to work or intern, feel free to again reach out to me. We are definitely looking to hire like all kinds of positions. So yeah, feel free to.
Okay, and please do the poll as you leave, so that we can stay in touch with the people who are here.
Prof. Ray, sorry, just to, before we end, for everyone who is participating, if you want to listen to this recording again, it will be up on our CIFA YouTube channel. So Joanne has just put the link up, so it will be posted up in that link. We've asked permission from Harith if we could post it up, and he's generously allowed us to post up this presentation. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone. Bye.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you for coming. Thank you, Harith.